memorizing the stories and the help in writing them was, her help was instrumental for me. The title of my project is Where the Animals Go, which is a series of connected stories. To make things interesting, the stories were connected through a common theme. And for these stories, it was the character Nathan Alcon. So they sort of progressed through his life from early childhood to old age. And since these stories are inspired by nature, I featured an animal in each story. The snail is not featured. And sorry, Paula, there's no blowflies either. But, each story did feature an animal in some way. So what is a short story? That was often asked me when I first got here. It's not a novel, it's not a poem. Novels tend to show a large narrative throughout a character's life or multiple characters' lives. We like to think of short stories as a character on the verge of something, some kind of revelation, maybe some kind of transformation or within a relationship or for themselves. And every good short story should, or any story I suppose, would represent the human condition in some way. And the human condition is the shared experience we all have. Everyone knows what it's like to love and grieve and have relationships with other people. And so the human condition is at the root of every good story. I tried to wed the concepts of the human condition with nature in all of these stories, and I hope I succeeded. So this is not a scientific presentation, but I wanted to sort of include this as the results section. You can think of this as the results, the stories that I wrote. So there were 4 stories that I finished in the collection, and the first one is The Cottage. Now, I want to illustrate how animals were represented in each of the stories. So I include this picture of a turtle because the turtle was the animal represented in this story. And this was actually taken out in the parking lot back there. Alice found it one day. Let me release it. So this takes place when Nathan Alcon is just a boy. And since he's just a boy, I didn't want to write the story from his perspective, since children have interesting perspectives, but it's kind of hard to tell a story from that angle. So this is from the perspective of his mother, and the story is really about this marriage. Nathan's mother Nora and her husband Benjamin have a strained marriage, and so that's what's going on the surface of the story. But in this particular scene, Nathan's mom and dad are driving him to this cottage to stay for the weekend. And they're driving on the road, and to distract Nathan, Nora says, "Well, watch the road for turtles. You know, you might it's something fun for a kid to do." But instead of excite Nathan, he gets really anxious, and he's afraid they're going to run one over. And so he won't take his eyes off the road. So the turtle, in this sense, sort of serves as a metaphor, not to cheapen the turtle's role in the story or anything, but it's sort of a metaphor in that sense for the marriage in a way. If you don't watch where you're going, you might run it over, you know? It's not harsh. And there's another feature of nature in this story that I also included. I was over by the education building one day with Nico and Jake, and we were looking up at the clouds, and I don't remember which one of you guys said this, but you mentioned, yeah, the average cloud weighs like 1 million pounds. Is that right? I looked that up later, and Google said it was right. And so that was an amazing concept to me, that all around us there's these millions of pounds of water vapor just floating over our heads. It's kind of scary if you think about it. And so I included that in this story, that idea. Nora is sitting in the back of this cottage looking over the lake, and she sees these clouds and can feel the pressure, you know, which I guess relates ultimately to her marriage. So this next story is called Assertiveness Training. Nathan was not necessarily featured in this story, however it's related to him because his uncle is the protagonist. And the caterpillar is the featured animal in this story. Now once again, the caterpillar is not what the story is about. Of course, it's about Kevin's relationship to his boss, which is a bad relationship. She doesn't like him very much, so he's afraid of her. And this story is also about a lack of nature. Kevin works at this industrial complex, so it's just all cement and bricks. But in the back, they have this little patch of grass, which they call their little nature spot. And it's kind of like a little pathetic example, but so they spend these, they go there for these employee wellness seminars, and this one happens to be assertiveness training. And while Kevin's listening to the speaker, he finds this caterpillar on his shoe, and he sort of just takes the caterpillar and holds it throughout this seminar. It's sort of in the background of the story, but by the end, it sort of serves as like an accompaniment to his transformation towards assertiveness, I suppose. Even in the dark, you can find show. This is the one picture I could not take because bats are very hard to take pictures of. They don't stand still for very long. And this returns to Nathan as as a grown-up now. He's married. He's got 2 kids, and so the story is about 2 different relationships for him. It's with his wife and also with his father. His father left when he was a young boy, and that sort of haunted him throughout these years. And now that he's married and has 2 kids, he's actually considering leaving his wife for someone else. Meanwhile, his father is terminally ill and wants to meet up with him and reconcile their differences from the years. And so the bat serves as a metaphor in this case. Bats are really cool. This is a great animal, I think, to write on because, first of all, they're sort of mystical in the way that they use echolocation, right? It's kind of hard for me to at least wrap my mind around. They don't use sight to hunt. And so the bat sort of served in this sense as we're all in the dark, kind of stumbling around in our relationships, but we can manage kind of to get through those despite it. And the final story in the collection that was Where the Animals Go. It's the title of the series. And this is at the end of Nathan's life now. He's an old man, and he's just had a really rough winter. One of his best friends passed away. He survived a heart attack, and he survived a bad car accident. And so he's facing the reality of his mortality now. And this story is a little different because it doesn't feature one specific animal, but rather animals in general. When I was a little kid and winter came around, you know how you notice that it doesn't seem like there's any animals around anymore. Like you don't see the squirrels in your yard as much, or the robins, or the insects. And so I used to think I didn't know where they went, like frogs. What happens to them during the winter? Like, do they just freeze and die? I don't know. Well, now that I'm older, I know obviously that there's hibernation, there's migration, there's all sorts